So it turns out that Andrea Johnson should rather have got a doctor's note than have gone to the Madlanga Commission. We also have to discuss what is going on at the PIC, the Public Investment Commission, which seems to be in free fall. And if it's in free fall, who's going to catch the 3 trillion rand that it has under management? And finally, Johannesburg could collapse, but not the way we're thinking. It actually could collapse on top of its old mines underneath us. Welcome to the Political Insider. This episode is brought to us by our partners at Trade Nation. They give you the opportunity to trade any market that you would like to trade. In real time, online. If you want to find out how you can trade your favorite stock or indice or currency or commodity, visit tradenation.com. Support them, they support us. So, Andrea Johnson appeared at the Madlanga Commission, and nothing says I'm innocent more than refusing to answer questions. It was the tactic of Andrea Johnson when asked why, in a case that goes back to 2018, she decided to send classified case documents about an assault to Feroz Khan about Feroz Khan. It was his own case that he had to answer. He sent it off to her, and the case ended up falling apart, I presume because he knew exactly what was in the case docket. She admits that she is facing possible prosecution over this particular problematic option that she chose and did not want to incriminate herself. So she's in enough trouble as it is, and now she's actually got a real legal problem. And her performance yesterday at the Madlanga Commission could make it increasingly difficult for our Captain Sleepy to not suspend her. Now, we do understand that Captain Sleepy is not exactly the quickest on the draw in this particular part of the Wild West. So when he will actually be acting, we are not too sure, but I don't think that Andrea Johnson will be celebrating Christmas as the head of IDAC. In fact, the real question is whether IDAC will survive at all or whether it will become like the Scorpions. Showing a lot of promise, we all mourn the demise of the Scorpions, but we must also, and myself included, all of us that bemoan the demise of the Scorpions must admit that sometimes, despite all the good work that the Scorpions were doing at the time, you could also go and investigate a case that is politically convenient. And, sometimes your boss might just call you and you're going suddenly investigating somebody who shouldn't have been investigated. It seems like IDAC is going down the same road. And it seems like perhaps Andrea Johnson's history in the Scorpions makes her vulnerable to deciding that it is way more important to investigate Dumisani Khumalo than it is to go after people that are really involved in corruption. And of course, IDAC don't have the track record of doing the good work that the Scorpions had done in cracking some high-profile cases before they were shut down. She confirmed that together with her husband, Junaid Johnson, who ironically works for Crime Intelligence, which is ironic because, that has been the hallmark of Andrea Johnson's career, is that she decided that Crime Intelligence had to be investigated. But she went with her husband, Junaid, to Feroz Khan's 50th birthday party. Now, I couldn't help but my mind started to wonder. Imagine, here are Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. The one is this great prosecutor. The other one is head of Crime Intelligence. They go to this 50th birthday party of Feroz Khan, a policeman, in this mansion in Houghton, surrounded by supercars, surrounded by gold leaf and finery. And then this family of super sleuths, never ever, maybe over a glass of champagne, discuss, I wonder how this particular policeman managed to amass all of this wealth. Surely, as you're sitting there in a quiet moment while you're waiting to go and do the Macarena or whatever was going on at his 50th birthday party, why you don't sit there and say, well, Feroz is disproportionately successful. I wonder what his wife does for a living. Oh, well, she's a housewife. So how can they have this mansion or these cars? But hey, I don't know. But, being the fine judge of character that she is, maybe Andrea Johnson, she said that her relationship started to cool with Feroz Khan after she met with Cloete Murray's son. Now, Cloete Murray, for those that don't know, him and his son Thomas were liquidators, and they were gunned down on the M1 highway between Johannesburg and Pretoria because of cases that they were investigating. And there's evidence and information in the public domain that link some of the central players in that assassination to Feroz Khan. And when she had spoken to Cloete Murray's son, the other son, not the one that was killed, because it would be hard to speak to him unless she's got really great talents, but when she was speaking to his other son, she could feel the anguish and the sadness. His father and his brothers being murdered, and nobody seemed to want to investigate this case. And that's when she decided to cool her relationship with Feroz Khan. Well done. Well done, Andrea. Better late than never. Unusually for a senior prosecutor, especially one that's being charged to do corruption, she was moved by this meeting. And then but it doesn't appear that she was so moved by, for example, the murder of Babita Deokaran. Appears that, she wasn't moved enough to investigate the looting of public hospitals, provincial hospitals in Gauteng. That must have led to far more deaths than the Murray father and son. What about the killing of 144 vulnerable people in the Life Esidimeni scandal? She didn't seem to be moved to be investigating that. Or how about the actual murder of Babita Deokaran herself? There was lots of publicity explaining that here was somebody unearthing corruption. I wonder why she wasn't moved to investigate that. She revealed that she received a poorly written death threat regarding the arrest of Dumisani Khumalo in Crime Intelligence. And the death threat read, "Mrs. Idak, you and your guy Shabalala, Perumal, Padiachia, and Baluchin went too far." All of the names were spelt wrong. "You're going to wish that you didn't F with us. Get body bags ready." Now, apparently, she was more disturbed by the content of the message than the poor grammar or the bad spelling. And it shook her up, because she says it was the first time in her career that she received a death threat. Now, it's ironic that she gets a death threat for doing her job when she's been criminally negligent ever since she took over as IDAC. So Andrea Johnson is going to continue telling her story in front of the Madlanga Commission. But I don't think, if we were sort of sitting there like those judges at the Olympics, I don't think we'd be giving her a very high score for what she did at the Madlanga Commission yesterday. And Andrea Johnson is literally fighting what started off as her going there to give evidence, might end up not just giving evidence to try and save her job, but in fact to stay out of jail. It's amazing, ironic, some of the turns in this Madlanga Commission have been. Before we carry on, I'd like to tell you the few people that are watching this that haven't subscribed. Please subscribe to The Political Insider. This helps us to grow. This helps the algorithm that YouTube uses to push this content out to more people that should be hearing this kind of information. If you want to comment on any story, give us your view. We'll reply as far as we can, and this helps us as well. So if you haven't subscribed already, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. On The Political Insider, we've been following the ongoing soap opera at the PIC for some time. What has attracted us to this story is that somebody has laid bare the flagrant threat of a significant sum of money being handed, money that's meant to be safeguarded and invested for the pensions of government employees. Instead, somebody has misused that money and given it to some of our tenderpreneurs where they didn't deserve to get it. Now, the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, has taken quite a radical step. At the moment, he seems to be the one man who is running the country, because the president obviously seems to be back to his job as a lawyer, trying to keep himself out of jail. The GNU seems to be doing nothing in particular, and the finance minister seems to be the only one that is trying to get people to do what they're meant to do. We saw it when he tried to withheld money from municipalities in the effort to get them doing their jobs better. We haven't heard the president say anything about that. And now, at least the finance minister is trying to save some money from getting stolen from the PIC. He called a general meeting of the board of the PIC, and they will vote on the removal of 9 non-executive directors. This includes the removal of the Deputy Finance Minister, David Masondo, who is chairperson of the PIC board. Now, we've discussed that in a very old agreement, the Deputy Minister of Finance assumes the position as chairperson of the PIC. Now, the vote that he's calling for is in terms of the Companies Act, on the grounds that the board has failed to perform its duties to the company. In anticipation of this, 4 of those 9 have already resigned ahead of next week's meeting. Now, as I said at the start, the PIC manages, and we should never forget this, 3.6 trillion rand of this government workers' pension fund and social insurance funds. And of course, it's always been too tempting for the comrades. We have seen many, many efforts for the state to get their hands on the PIC so that they can get their hands on this money. The mandate of the PIC is to invest this money, and a portion of their investment goes to solid listed companies, the household names. They've got massive investments in companies listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. They own buildings. They own all kinds of investments, but they also have a portion of their investments in unlisted companies. It's real speculative stuff where they can go out there, do their due diligence, and decide to lend some company that isn't listed, but perhaps they've got a great business. You lend them 500 million rand, stuff that they couldn't get from a bank, and get a share in that business. And the fact that they're unlisted, it just means that there's a few checks and balances that aren't in place. This is meant to be covered by the work that those investment officers at the PIC does. But sadly, this also means that if you know the right people, you can get a massive investment for your business, even though it doesn't necessarily qualify. Now, what has been the big issue has been the suspension of CEO Patrick Dlamini. And I'm going to stand by the fact that this guy seems to have been the one person who is doing the right thing. There's allegations that he had committed various transgressions. One of those transgressions are something which I think was within his mandate, and that was to commission a forensic inquiry into the much disputed Lanseria airport deal. Issue is that the PIC suffered a big loss, but a BE investment firm, Acapulco Trading, made a mint, despite the fact that in the term of their loan they had defaulted. They should have got naught back. They end up getting 500 million rand back and making a 200 million rand profit. In 2020, right, then energized New Dawn presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa commissioned the Mpati Commission to investigate corruption at the PIC and make recommendations for the improvement. And they recommended that the PIC board should be chaired not by a politician, and the whole PIC should be free of political influence. But this part of what the Mpati Commission recommended was never implemented. I wonder why. At last, and at least, the Democratic Alliance has tabled a bill to depoliticize the PIC. This is really, I'm surprised that the numbers are so small, given the fact that they've got so much money over there, and it must be just way too tempting to not have a go at this money. And you got to applaud the finance minister for finally doing something to try and protect this money. And it's going to be interesting, and you're going to hear more about this money. But it's there. Somebody has earned money that they shouldn't have earned. In this case, it's not taxpayer money. However, portion of investment that the PIC manages is guaranteed by the state. You and I, our money at the end of it all. So the PIC should go up in flames, like, let's say, other businesses we thought could never be broken, like Eskom and SAA, the taxpayer could be liable to make up for those defined funds. We'll keep you in touch with this one. Poor old Joburg. If things weren't bad enough for Johannesburg, we hear that the city might finally be put out of its misery thanks to the Zamazamas. Now, we all know that Johannesburg exists, was created because it happens to be sitting on a mountain of gold. It's a reef that stretches all the way from Springs in the east to Randfontein in the west. And it was, for a time, the richest gold mining deposit in the world. It was mined like crazy. And it may not surprise you to hear that our municipal authorities, we do have some, they just don't do their jobs, continue to approve major developments without understanding what happens beneath the city. Beneath the city looks like Swiss cheese. There's just holes everywhere from mining. Now, proposed developments over mining in areas that have been mined before, generally require consultation with mining authorities, who then check historical mining plans before the developments are approved. That's to make sure that they can proceed safely. In other words, that's just nice words for saying, check what's beneath, so that if you're going to put up a skyscraper, that there's not some great big mine below and the whole thing collapses. Now, according to Professor Henny Grobler from the University of Johannesburg, he believes that this process has been weakened over time. Apparently, this is something that was done, as a matter of course, but now it's not done at all. And Grobler believes that Johannesburg urgently needs an integral digital mapping system, combining historic mining plans, geological information, municipal planning records, and engineering data, so that the underground risks can be assessed long before the developments are approved. Now, that just makes common sense in the modern days of technology. Put everything together, and then we can see, yes, it's fine to develop in this area. That area is suspect. So let's sort of put, a golf course on top there. It's unlikely to collapse. Now, when Johannesburg was developed, as it grew, unmined pillars of earth were deliberately left in place. They were there and were engineered to support the mine workings that were happening below and ultimately the surface above. It makes sense. You put a framework underneath, as you would if you were building a building. And according to Grobler, it's like if you remove these pillars, it's like removing the four walls holding up a roof. Eventually, everything starts to collapse. Now, you have to admit, however, that this does sound like one of those Will Smith movies, and it might be a fitting way for the city of Johannesburg to end. I mean, the city having survived more than 30 years of ANC misrule, eventually the city collapsed in a big hole. We've seen how the ANC runs cities. We've seen the sewage in the water in Durban. We've seen the lack of water in the city of Tshwane. We've seen the complete criminality in Ekurhuleni. You've actually got to ask yourself, how Joburg's made it this far is a miracle. But don't despair, City of Johannesburg residents. We might be getting some divine intervention. It looks like the Reverend Frank Chikane will get the nomination as the ANC's mayoral candidate for the city. And we need the good Lord on our side for the city. As part of the ANC's youth policy, the 75-year-old stalwart Chikane, who is also head of their integrity committee, is favourite to get the nod as their mayoral candidate. Now, there is no better way to prove how serious they are about governance that the mayoral selection committee includes President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's got nothing better to do. They've apparently been conducting grueling face-to-face interviews at Luthuli House since the beginning of July. And one of these days, maybe even before the election, they'll announce who their candidate is. Despite not having any civic experience, the ANC believes that Chikane, together with his good friend upstairs, will be a direct counterweight to Helen Zille and Action SA's Herman Mashaba, who have both previously had mayoral experience. Sadly, our incumbent mayor, Dada Moreira, received 0 votes from his own regional executive committee. Poor Dada. Loyiso Masuku, together with her husband Bandile, has been implicated in COVID scandals, PE scandals, looks set to retain the position as deputy mayor if the ANC wins. So there you go. My advice to the good reverend is keep an eye on your deputy. That might be where your problem exists. City of Tshwane saw the withdrawal of the controversial Eugene Modise, who's their regional chairperson. He's a guy whose name has come up in one scandal too many, and their favored candidate is Aaron Maluleke. Of course, the EFF and Patriotic Alliance must be licking their lips at the prospect of another weak ANC mayoral candidate, which means that they'll be more dependent on them. And then the ANC in Ekurhuleni is going back to the future. Former Mayor Ntombi Mekwe caught the attention of national leadership as a consensus figure. You got to love consensus figures. They please nobody. Ntombi Mekwe was the Ekurhuleni mayor between 2008 and 2010. She was an unspectacular mayor and eventually found not to be Zuma enough to keep her job back in 2010. So it's fun and games as we head towards the local government election. We will keep you up to date as things develop. That's all I have for you today on the Political Insider. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon.